to specifically focus on yet another style of temple architecture, that is the South India mein, the one that flourished, which is called as Dravida style of temple architecture. Okay, so today's lecture is exclusive lecture dedicated to Dravida style of temple architecture. So let us proceed with the session. Just a second. Yeah, is the PPT visible? Please, anyone just say
yes, ma'am.
All right, great. Chalo. Let's begin with the features of the Dravida style of temple architecture. So in the previous session, we have broadly seen the features of Dravida style of temple architecture. Now, what type of questions can be expected in mains? Okay. So first of all, the first basic question which can come in mains is explain the features of Dravida style of temple architecture. So what are we supposed to write if this is the question? Okay. So first of all, I would suggest you all that at least you should be able to draw a rough sketch. Okay, so no one is going to tell you to draw a proper sketch, but at least a freehand drawing, a rough sketch representing the different aspects of the temple architecture, it is expected in order to fetch more marks. Okay, so as we have already seen, the Dravida style of temple architecture, it is first of all marked by a boundary wall. Okay, so this is the most important aspect of Dravida temple architecture, that these temples have first of all a very big temple complex, and the temple complex, it is marked by a compound wall or a boundary wall, which is usually called as prakara. Yes, we have seen this in the previous session. So prakara is nothing but the compound wall. Then we have an entrance. So entrances in the Dravida style are called as Gopuram. So entrance is nothing but the gateway to the temple. Now, in the beginning, we had only one entrance, but slowly and gradually, as we proceed with the different dynasties, we had so many entrances, and we'll see that in one of the temples, there were 14 entrances, 14 big Gopurams. Okay. Then the next important thing is that here the tower is called as Vimana, and we know that here the tower is like it's in the shape of a pyramid, and that is the distinguishing feature between Dravida and Nagara. Now, Nagara may we see that the tower is Shikhar, which is a curving one, whereas in Dravida we have a geometrically in the form of a pyramid we have a Vimana. Then on the Vimana we see there is a crowning element which is called as Shikhar. Okay, so Shikhar in North India we call the tower as Shikhar, whereas in South India the crowning element, so this crowning element, the circular one, is called as a Shikhar, and uske upar aata hai Kalash. So these are the distinctive features of the Dravida style of temple architecture. The other aspects of Dravida style is that usually in North India we find that in the entrances there are river goddesses, Ganga, Yamuna, ya fir Mithunas. These are the erotic figures. So usually such figures are seen in Nagara style, whereas in South India, in Dravida style, instead of these river goddesses, we find Dwarapal and Dikpals. Okay, so Dwarapals are nothing but the doorkeepers, and Dikpals are the guardians of all the directions. We'll be seeing them as we'll be going through the different temples. So just remember, in South India, we have Dwarapals and Dikpals. Then one of the most defining feature of Dravida style is a large water reservoir or a temple tank. Okay, so within the temple complex, we will find that there is a distinctive aspect of temple tank being constructed. Apart from that, in South India, since the temple complexes are very big, we usually find subsidiary shrines also. Like for example, if we take the example of Brindavaneshwara Temple, it's a Shiva temple, but within the temple complex, there is a separate shrine for Ganpati, okay, Ganesh. So in this way, we even have subsidiary shrines in one single temple complex. Okay, even this is seen in North India also, but in South India, it's more elaborate ones. Then in North India, we had seen one peculiar feature of multiple shikhars. If you remember that, we had seen few temples, especially the Khajuraho temples were the ones which had multiple shikhars, and this shikhar, which was the most tallest one, it houses the Garbhagrihi, the main deity, but you won't find such aspect in South India. So in South India we do not see multiple vimanas. Okay, we have only single vimana. So the first question which can be in mains is, state the features of the Dravida style. The second question we can expect is distinguish between Nagara and Dravida. So all these points, with the help of these points, you should be in a position to distinguish between the Nagara style and the Dravida style. Okay, so this is the first aspect. Any doubt in the features of Dravida style so that I can proceed ahead? Any issues?
No, ma'am.
Is it clear? Because we have extensively seen this in the previous session also, right? So we'll move ahead with the next aspect. The next question which can come in mains is that trace the evolution of temple architecture in South India. Okay, so in the similar manner, we had seen the temple architecture evolution in North India. Today, we are going to focus evolution of temple architecture in South India. And in the upcoming session, we will be focusing on Deccan. That is, we are going to focus on the Vesara style. Today, it's Dravida style. So we are going to trace the evolution of temple architecture in South India. So when we talk about the Dravida style of temple architecture, it evolved under 5 distinctive phases. The very first phase being the Pallava dynasty. Okay, so the Pallava dynasty, it marks the beginning of the Dravida style of temple architecture in South India. So 7th century AD to 9th century AD is the first phase. We are going to discuss it in detail. Okay, the second phase is under the Cholas. So under the Cholas, we call it as the peak phase of Dravida temple architecture. Then after Cholas, we had Pandyas. Now you will be finding so many Pandyas in South India. One are the Sangam Pandyas, one are the early medieval Pandyas. These Pandyas which we are referring over here, these are the later Pandyas, okay? Later Pandyas which existed after the Chola rule, okay? Jo bache kuche the, they regained their strength and once again they came to the power. So these are the later Pandyas. They even contributed to the temple architecture. But here we do not find elaborate temples being built. Then the most important phase is the Vijayanagar. Now, when I talk about the Vijayanagar temple architecture, some of the features were of the Dravida style, but you will find some distinctive features, which are the unique characteristics of Vijayanagar temple architecture. And the last one being the Nayaks. So Nayaks were actually the military commanders under the Vijayanagar Empire. But as soon as the Vijayanagar Empire declined, these Nayaks declared their independence and they didn't build any new temple, but they added to the existing ones. Okay, so these are the broad 5 phases. So first question here can be trace the evolution of temple architecture in South India, where you need to emphasize, elaborate these 5 phases. And the second aspect, usually in mains we find specific question on Pallavas. Okay, so there can be a completely separate 10 or 15 marks question on Pallava temple architecture. Similarly, there can be a separate question on Chola temple architecture, and there can be a separate question on Vijayanagar temple architecture. So out of these 5 phases, one question can be a single question. Second, you can expect separate questions on Pallavas, separate questions on Cholas, and separate one on Vijayanagar. So we are going to study these 3 on which we can expect a separate question in a detailed manner. So beginning with Pallavas, in the previous sessions, we have already discussed a lot about the first 2 phases of Pallavas, okay? So if there is a short note, a separate short note on Pallava temple architecture, so what are you supposed to, how are you supposed to proceed and what are you supposed to write? So first of all, the chronology of Pallavas, 7th century CE to 9th century CE. Second thing, Pallava temple architecture are classified into 4 categories according to the rulers, okay, according to the kings who patronized them. Fine. So we will find over here 4 distinctive groups under the Pallava temple architecture. The first one, it's a beginning of temple architecture. Now, this first one is not considered to be a Dravida style. Why? Because it is just the beginning of the temple architecture under Pallavas, which is called as the Mahendravarman group of temples. These are the early temples which were patronized by Mahendravarman I, and these are the rock-cut temples which we have studied under the rock-cut temple architecture. And these temples are called as mandaps, right? So we had seen that the first group of temples under Mahendravarman, they are usually referred to as mandaps. So in the last session, we studied about Varaha Mandap, we studied about Krishna Mandap. So try to associate it with the Mahendravarman group. So such mandaps can be seen at different places like Mandanagapattu, then Mahendravadi and Tiruchirappalli. Then coming to the next group. Now the next group, that is Narsimha. So Narsimha was the son of Mahendravarman I, and Narsimha he is also referred to as Mahamalla, that is a great wrestler, and he built a very big city, Mahamallapuram or Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu. And this particular city, it houses monolithic, so again rock cut monolithic freestanding temples, which again we have completed in the previous session. Now these temples are rathas, Pancha Pandav rathas, and this marks the beginning of Dravida style of temple architecture. Okay, so यहाँ पे ये जो रथ है, in this rath you will see the pyramid shaped Vimana. Okay, so remember that the first group does not represent the typical Dravida style of temple architecture. It's a basic temples which are called as mandaps. The second group onwards, we see the beginning of Dravida style of temple architecture. Then the third group is called as Rajasamha. So his original name is Narasimha Varman II, and he is also known in history as Rajasamha, and his two temples are very much famous. And here onwards we see structural temples proper. We have seen what is the meaning of structural temples. So structural temples are those structures which have the different elements, components of proper temple, like there are pillars, there are beams, there are lintels being used, there is proper mandap. So all these elements you will be finding in the third group, Rajasamha group. So the two famous temples of the Rajasamha group are Kailashnath temple at Kanchi and Shore temple at Mahabalipuram. Then coming to the final and the conclude. So this phase, Rajasamha group, is considered to be the epic phase, or you can see the peak phase, zenith phase of Pallava temple architecture, because here we are seeing a gradual progress from the rock cut temples. We are slowly progressing to monolithic temples, and now we are going to the structural temples. And overall, during the Rajasamha time, Pallavas were at their peak of their glory. Economically, they were quite prosperous, and that can be clearly depicted in the form of the temple architecture of this time. And then we see the last phase, Nandivarman group, under the Pallava king Nandivarman. But here we see that now the Pallavas are at the stage of their downfall. So definitely he also built structural temples only, but they are not that grandiose as compared to the Rajasimha group of temples. So the famous temples built under Nandivarman are Vaikunta Perumal temple at Tirunelveli and Mukteshwar temple. Okay, so if there is a short note on Pallavas, you are supposed to categorize the Pallava temple architecture under the four broad groups. Okay, Mahendravarman, Narasimha Varman or Mahamalla group, Rajasimha, and the last one being Nandivarman group. Now we'll see the images of the temples. So this we have already seen. This is the first one under Mahendravarman, that is a mandap. So this is a Varaha mandap. Okay, then this is again Krishna mandap. We had seen this, this depicts that Krishna holding that Govardhan mountain in order to protect the people from the torrential rainfall. So these are the early two belonging to the Mahendravarman group. Now we are moving towards the Rathas. We are moving towards the next group, that is Narasimhavarman group. And as I said that this marks the development of the beginning of Dravida temple architecture. But here the temples are small in size. Why? It is just the beginning. They are not that ornamental, not that decorative, but yes, we do find decorative elements, but not to that extent. So here we have already seen there are Pancha Pandav Rath. So the biggest one is this Rath, Dharmaraj Rath, which is also called as Yudhishthir Rath. Now you can see in this image, see the Vimana. So the Vimana, it's clearly in the form of a pyramid, right? So this is the beginning of the Dravida temple architecture. We have a proper pyramid Vimana, and Vimana ke upar, you can see over here a crowning element which is called as Shikhar. Then coming to the next Ratha, so this is the Bhim Rath, and here there is a Arjun Rath. Then we have Nakul Sahadev Rath, which is a joint Rath, and the next one is the Draupadi Rath, and the last one is the elephant sculpture. So these are the second group of temples built under Narasimhavarman I, also called as Mahamalla. And this is the beautiful carving over here. We have seen this in the previous session. That is, there is a dispute between the historians. Some say it is Arjuna's penance to obtain a powerful weapon from Shiva, and some says it's a beautiful descent of river Ganga. So we exactly don't know, but yes, there's a beautiful carving at Rathas at Mahabalipuram. Okay, so this is the second group. Now see the beautiful third group. So as the name suggests, shore temple. Why they are called as the shore temples? Because this temple is located at the seashore, Coromandel coast. Okay, east coast of India, Coromandel coast, shore temple at Mahabalipuram. So that itself gives it a name. So you can see this temple, it is under the third king, the third group, that is Rajasama or Narasimhavarman II. And you can see the temple ka jo size hai, it increases gradually as compared to the Ratha temple. Then here there are certain carvings. So the first carving is related, it is a Soma Skanda panel. So it is said that there is a Shiva, Parvati and their son Kartik. Skanda over here in South India means Kartik. Okay, so Shiva, Parvati and Kartik, and this is Mahishasuramarthini lion. That is depiction is there. Then the next is again under Rajasama. So under Rajasama, we have seen the example of two temples, Shore temple and Kailashnath temple at Kanchi. Now see again the evolution of temple. Come, just imagine the Ratha temples, and now see this temple, the big one, more elaborate, more ornamental. Fine. So this is Kailashnath temple at Kanchi. And here there are few beautiful panels. So the first one is depicting, first sculpture depicts Shiv as Gangadhar, that is capturing river Ganga with the strand of his hair, the first one. And the second one is a depiction of goddess Durga. So these two are at the Kailashnath temple, Kanchi. Now the last temples are the Nandivarman group of temples. Now you can see the size slowly and gradually shrinks. This is the last phase, though it's a structural temple, but it is not as elaborate as the Rajasama group of temple. Why? Because we saw that now the Pallava dynasty was at their downfall period. So this first one is the Mukteshwar temple, and the second one is the Vaikuntha Perumal temple. Okay, so this is all about Pallava. So if there is a question in mains, so you should be in a position to narrate all these temples. You should be in a position to write relevant examples wherever possible. Give examples of the temples, whatever you remember from this, the carvings and all. If you describe in the examination, it would be a value addition. Okay, so Pallavas, the first part is done. Mahendravarman, Narasimhavarman, Rajasama, Nandivarman. Any doubt in Pallavas?
No.
Fine. We'll proceed with the next one now. The second phase is the phase under Cholas. Okay, so again, very important, and there has been already a question in mains. Okay, on the Chola temple architecture. So we need to prepare this, and because you know that from the medieval history we have questions coming only on art and culture only. So we need to prepare such questions. So Cholas, 9th century CE to 12th century CE. Now, while writing, so usually I've seen many of the students, what do they do? They directly jump to the peak phase of Cholas. Directly they want to write answers about Brihadeshwara temple and all. No. Whenever the question is on Cholas, try to represent both the phases, the early phase also and the later phase also. This will mark a good impression on the paper evaluator. Okay, so first phase is 9th century to, so I have divided into two phases. First phase 1 is 9th century to 10th century AD. Now during this time we see the temples are small to moderate size, and this is proper Dravida temples which we are seeing. Then Vimana, the temple tower is small in this phase. Usually in this phase, there is absence of gopurams. We do not find gopurams. Even when we saw the Pallava temples, we have not seen a single gopuram in the Pallava temple up till now. हमने shore temples देखा, we saw the Kailashnath temple, we didn't see gopurams. So अभी तक gopuram का style आया नहीं है. Okay, so absence of gopurams, absence of murals. Murals are nothing but the paintings on the ceilings. So we do not find all these elements in the phase 1 of Chola temple. So temples are small to moderate size, small Vimana, no gopurams, no murals. Now, which are the important temples? So the first one is Vijayanagar Choleshwar temple. It is at Nartamalai in Tamil Nadu. Second one, Balasubramaniam temple at Kannur, Tamil Nadu, Kannur in Tamil Nadu. Then Nageshwara temple at Kumbakonam in Tamil Nadu. So all these three examples are in Tamil Nadu only. Let us see the temples of Chola phase 1. So the first one is the Vijayanagar Choleshwaram temple. So you can see over here, very like it's a medium sized temple. and simple. There is no gopuram. It's, yes, definitely carvings are there, but not to that great extent. Okay, so this is the Vijayalaya Choleshwaram temple. Second one, you can see Balasubramaniam temple. Again, you can find over here, it is not that grandiose. It's simple in its architecture. So this is the phase one of Chola temple architecture. Now we'll move to the peak phase of Chola temple architecture. That is the phase two. So phase two, 11th century AD to 12th century AD. Now, what are the phases of phase two? What are the features of phase two? So in the phase two, definitely the one thing which is noticed over here, gradually the structures become very massive. So massive structures. Second one, size of the vimanas. Now vimanas become so tall that we, if we'll see the Brihadeshwara temple ka vimana, it is 190 feet. So almost the vimanas reach around 200 feet. Itna bada vimana hai. Then the temple complex. So proper big temple complex with a boundary wall, that is prakara. Gopurams. Now we will be seeing elaborate gopurams from henceforth. Then there is a separate Nandi Mandap. So usually these Chola kings, they were the devotees of Lord Shiva, and you know that Nandi is it's seen in the Shiva temple. So there is a separate mandap being seen, and that mandap houses the shrine of Nandi. Then we have chariot mandap. So chariot mandap, we have already seen mandap in the size of, in the shape of a chariot, in the shape of a rath, in the shape of a, there are wheels attached to that mandap. So this such mandap, the chariot mandap, so yahan se ye evolution ho raha hai, slowly and gradually. Okay, so chariot mandap, it's being seen at Airavateshwar temple and Shiv Nataraj Chidambaram temple. Then you will see rich sculptures. Then dwarpals are nothing but the gatekeepers, okay, and digpals. So digpals are the guardians of all the directions. Then you will see murals and dance halls. Okay, so these are the elaborate features of the Chola temples phase two. Now, which are the important temples? So the first one being Brihadeshwara temple, which is also called as Rajeshwara temple. It is at Thanjore in Tamil Nadu. Now, this temple was built by one of the famous Chola kings, Raja I. As a result, this temple is also called as Rajeshwara temple. There is yet another Brihadeshwara temple. This is at Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and this temple was built by Rajendra Chola. So Rajendra Chola, it is said that he defeated Pala king Mahipal, and after defeating Pala king Mahipal, in order to commemorate his victory, he built a very beautiful city of Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and this city has beautiful temples, and one of the famous one being Brihadeshwara temple. Then we have Airavateshwar Darasuram temple, it's at Kumbakonam, and we have Shivanatrach Chidambaram temple. So these are the important temples of Chola phase 2. Okay, so let us see the temples and its important features. Okay, so first of all, we'll see this is the Brihadeshwara temple, also called as a Rajeshwara temple. It's at Thanjore. Now, as I mentioned, Rajeshwara, he was a devotee of Lord Shiva. So this temple is dedicated to Lord Shiva, and you can see over there in one corner there is a subsidiary shrine. Okay, so this is a shrine dedicated to Lord Ganpati, Ganesh. Okay, so in South India, like we see that in a temple complex there are different subsidiary shrines dedicated to other deities as well. Okay, related deities. Then see now see the Vimana. Even on the Vimana, so this is the Vimana of Brihadeshwara temple, almost 190 feet, and even the Vimana is beautifully carved. So we see that the Vimana's ka size to bada hai, it's an elaborate Vimana, plus ornamentally it is much more rich in terms of ornamentation and sculpture. Okay, then this is the shikhar, the crowning element. So you can see over here the big crowning element, and even this crowning element is rich in its decoration, and on that crowning element we have kalash. What is this? This is a gopuram. Gopuram means, as I told that, ki gopuram is nothing but the entrance gate, right? So this is the entrance. So now we are seeing that ki from the Chola period onwards, emergence of gopurams, and the gopuram, that is gateway itself, is such a big and massive, and even gopuram is in the style of a pyramid, and beautifully carved gopuram is there. Then the next feature is that, yeah, you can see over here a special mandap. And if you see the ceiling, the mandap has painting, right? So this is called as mural paintings. Okay, so mural paintings, the paintings which are there on the ceiling. So here you can see the beautiful colorful mural paintings being done, and this is the Nandi mandap. Okay, so this is the big Nandi statue being there in this Nandi mandap, specifically dedicated to Nandi. This is an elephant relief again on the same temple, Brihadeshwara Temple at Thanjore. Then this is the depiction of Shiva as Ardhanarishwar, that is half Shiva and half Parvati. Okay, all this are in the very same temple itself. This is a separate Ganpati shrine in the same temple complex. Okay, so whatever we have seen, these were the structures associated with the first temple, Brihadeshwara Temple, built by Rajaraja Chola at Thanjavur. This temple is Brihadeshwara Temple at Gangaikonda Cholapuram, built by Rajendra Chola. Again, you can see the Vimana, the beautifully ornamented pyramidal shaped Vimana. Now, this is Airavateshwar Temple ka mandap. So as I mentioned that the one of the feature of Chola temple was that beginning of chariot mandap we see over here. So you can see over here mandap in the shape of a chariot. You can see over here there is a wheel, right? So this is a temple, and temple ko associate mandap hai. Mandap in the shape of a chariot. So example you can state of a Airavateshwar Temple. So whenever you are like, there is a question on the Chola architecture. So whenever you are mentioning chariot mandap, there and there itself try to mention, recollect the example also. So Airavateshwar Temple has a beautiful chariot mandap. Now we'll come to the next aspect of Dravida style is the temple tank. So see the beautiful temple tank and the complex. This is the Shiv Nataraj Chidambaram temple. It's a very beautiful temple, and here there are two gopurams. Okay, so do gopurams says mandir mein, one shrine is there, two gopurams are there, and in the center there is a temple tank. Okay, so elaborate temple complex is there with proper boundary wall. You can see over here the compound wall prakara and the different gopurams. See, even the gopuram. So the gopuram is also beautifully carved with so many decorative elements and colors being used over here. And yeah, one thing I want to say over here, usually in a Shiv temple, we always have Shivlingam, we always have a Shivlinga in Shiva temple. This is the temple where instead of Shivlinga, we have Nataraj. Okay, Shiva in the depiction. So जो main गर्भगृह है, जो मेन प्लेस है जहाँ पे डीटी को हम वर्शिप करते हैं, वहां पे इंस्टेड ऑफ शिवलिंग वी फाइंड नटराज. सो नटराज इज द प्रिंसिपल आइकन ऑफ दिस टेम्पल, एंड इट इज सेड दैट कि this Nataraj is being depicted in Ananda Tandav position. Now, this Ananda Tandav position is a Tandav for the prosperity, for the peace. Okay, so that Tandav has been depicted, right? This is the damaged pillar hall. So we had seen in the last session that symbolic pillared hall, 1000 pillared hall. So definitely there are not 1000 pillars, but just a way of saying if there are many pillars, such a hall we usually call it as 1000 pillared mandap. So that is seen in the Shiv Nataraj temple. So this is a Shiv Nataraj temple ka complex mein there is a 1000 pillared hall. Then again, this is a carving on the gopuram. It is depicting Kalyan Sundara. Kalyan Sundara is nothing but wedding of Shiv and Parvati. Okay, so it's an artwork showing wedding of Shiv and Parvati. So this are the this is all about the Chola temples which we have seen, the elaborate features. So we'll once again just see the features. Yeah, so massive structures. So from the images, it is very clear the temples are quite big. We saw the tall vimanas. We saw that the vimanas itself are beautifully carved. Then we saw the temple complex with a boundary wall, prakara. Gopuram, so we saw that the emergence of Gopuram. Mandap is, Nandi Mandap is there, chariot Mandap. One more thing you can add over here, 1000 pillared Mandap. We have seen this in the Shiv Nataraj Chidambaram temple. Then Dwarpals and Dikpals, this I could not get the image. And then murals, yes, we have seen the murals being beautifully depicted in the Nandi Mandap. And there is a separate dance hall. Okay, and you can give the quote the examples: Brihadeshwara Temple at Tanjore, then Gangaikonda Cholapuram, Airavateshwar, and Shiv Nataraj Temple. Now, the three Chola temples are called as living structures. Okay, so the great living Chola temples. Okay, so UNESCO has designated World Heritage Site to the three Chola temples, Brihadeshwar temple at Tanjore, Brihadeshwar one at Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and Airavateshwar at Darasuram. So why these temples are called as the great living Chola temples? The reason being that कि up till now the temple में जो rituals हैं they are still being performed. Okay, so from the 1,000 years उस time से जो rituals that were performed from the Chola period, today also till now the same rituals are being practiced. So it's an example of you are carrying ahead the living tradition of that time, and as a result these temples are categorized as the great living Chola temples, and they have been designated as the UNESCO's World Heritage Site. So this is all about the Cholas. Any doubt in the Cholas?
No, ma'am.
Is it clear? Yes. So if there is a separate question about
Yes, ma'am.
Cholas, you are supposed to address this in 2 phases. Okay. First of all, you will be writing about the phase 1, 9th century AD to 10th one, and then you will be addressing the later phase, the later one, 11 to 12th. Okay. So in that way, you have to address. Now coming to the next evolution, and yeah, so in the evolution
Ma'am,
first.
ma'am, I have a doubt. Who got the Airataveshwar temple constructed?
That is
Is it-
no, not Rajendra Chola exactly. No, the later Chola, but I don't know exactly the name. And
Oh,
that
okay, ma'am.
okay, so
Okay.
yeah, you can just later on. It is
I'll check it
Airavateshwar.
out,
Yeah,
ma'am.
it is dedicated to Lord Shiva only, but exactly I don't know. Like it's a later
Okay.
Chola king. Okay, you can just look
Okay.
into it. Fine, later on.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it is. I think so. Raja Chola 2. Raja Chola 2.
Okay, ma'am.
Raja Chola 2.
Okay,
Second
ma'am, I'll just
Raja.
check.
Fine, later on you can just check it. Fine. Coming to the Pandyas. So Pandyas, these are the later Pandyas, 12th century AD to 14th century AD. In general, we do not find they building the new temples. Hardly any temples have been built by them. But what did they do? They started adding gopurams to the existing ones. तो जो existing temples थे उनको ही ये गोपुरम ऐड करते गए, and इसके लिए this period is called as a period of gopurams, because जो भी existing temples थे उसको ये गोपुरम ऐड करते गए. One gopuram is there, then they added one more gopuram. So like that they went on doing, and one temple which they built is the Madurai Meenakshi temple, which we'll be seeing at the end, because this temple was further renovated and reconstructed by Nayaks. Okay, so just remember as of now that to Pandyas we attribute Madurai, the Meenakshi temple which is there at Madurai, and as such Pandyas did not contribute to new temple building. They went on adding structures to the earlier temples, and especially they added large gopurams. Now let's move to the peak phase, that is the Vijayanagar, and this is very much important because we can expect a separate dedicated question to the on the Vijayanagar temple architecture. So first of all, the chronology, it is 14th century AD to 16th century AD. Now, when we talk about Vijayanagar temple architecture, first of all, it has its own distinctive elements. Apart from that, it also carries with it the Dravida style. So Dravida style is already there. Apart from that, Chola style ke bhi kuch, Chola architecture ke bhi kuch elements, like the Cholas added mandaps, right? Chariot mandap, 1,000-pillared mandap. All this was continued under the Vijayanagar. But apart from that, they also added their own distinctive features. Okay, so that we will be understanding. The very first one, they started hard granite tradition. So temples which were built henceforth, they were built using the hard granite tradition. The earlier temples, they were using the other stones, the soft stones, but now the proper hard granite was being used from henceforth. The second thing, we find Raya Gopurams. So actually in Vijayanagar, the king was called as Raya. So the Vijayanagar king, he commissioned the building of gopurams, and as a result it is called as the Raya Gopurams. And you will find that the gopuram itself are so big, and they are very tall Raya Gopurams, comparable to the Vimana of a temple. So tall Vimanas also, they are very big. Aman. So Aman we had seen. Can anyone tell me what do you mean by Aman? In the previous session we had seen the structure called as Aman. Anyone remembers who were there in the previous session? Yes. What is Aman?
Ma'am, it's a specific kind of a
Yes, it
okay.
okay.
Like main
Garbhagriha,
spouse
ma'am.
will be placed in the Aman.
Correct. So when we talk about Aman, it's a Garbhagrihi, which houses the spouse of the main deity. Like for example, if the temple is Shiva temple, तो बीच में जो main गर्भगृह होगा, that will house Shiv, that is Shivlingam or Shiv, and बाजू में एक गर्भगृह होगा, that will house the spouse of Shiva, Parvati. So that small garbhagrihi which houses the spouse of the main temple deity, that garbhagrihi is called as Aman. So Aman, it's the feature which we see over here. Kalyan Mandap. So Kalyan Mandap, it's a new element. We have not seen Kalyan Mandap in the previous temples. Kalyan Mandap, as I mentioned, that it's a mandap, it's a special mandap where on the festive occasions the deities are united. Okay, so one of the students, I guess Sindhuja, yesterday told me that today the Kalyan Mandaps are used in South India specifically for the marriage purpose. So Kalyan Mandap today are marriage halls, like mandir mein jo jaake shaadi karte, they usually they do it in the Kalyan Mandap. There is some disturbance. Yeah, please mute. Yeah. That is there. And coming to, yes, Kalyan Mandap. So on the festive occasions, the deities are brought over here for the unification purpose. Then 1,000-pillared Mandap continued under Vijayanagar. Ranga Mandap, it's a special Mandap where dance and musical performances are being conducted. Then highly carved pillar. The pillars are so massive, at the same time they're so elegant and so graceful. Dekh ke aap bol sakte it's a Vijayanagar pillar. Then anioticals. The anioticals, it's a special feature of Vijayanagar temple architecture. Now what is anioticals? Anioticals matlab ek jo pillar hai, pillar ko you are cutting from mid aap cut kar rahe ho, and that mid of the pillar houses a big sculpture. We will be seeing this in the form of images. So as of now, remember that one of the defining, so unique feature of Vijayanagar temple architecture are the Kalyan Mandap. Then we have highly carved pillars and anioticals. Anioticals, pillar is cut in order to house a massive sculpture. Then we see that the temple complexes, they are very large, horizontally elaborative temple complexes. Charat Mandap, which is seen at the Vitthal temple at Hampi, multicolor mural paintings and musical pillars. So this is again a feature of Vitthal temple at Hampi, which we will be seeing. Okay, and the temple complex becomes very elaborate, horizontally widening of the temple complex. So these are the exclusive features of the Vijayanagar Empire, and many temples were built by the Vijayanagar kings, and the famous king being the Krishna Dev Raya. Okay, so under him many temples were built. Hampi, as you all know, Hampi is a UNESCO ka World Heritage Site. It's in Karnataka, and that Hampi, it houses many temples. Okay, so Hampi may especially, there are many temples of the Vijayanagar Empire. So we'll be seeing the different temples of the Vijayanagar Empire. So I guess the meeting will end. Yeah. One more thing about this. Yeah. So Hampi, you need to remember that it was a capital of the Vijayanagar Empire.